This is Steve Rao on Pod and Roku's TV edition, World Edition. I greet you live from the America city of Morrisville in the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America. And today on this show, as always, we talk about global affairs, innovation, and increasingly turbulent world politically and economically. And today we begin talking about what I call the world in brief. Every day when I begin the show, I usually end with a monologue, but today I'm just going to go in. We do have a special guest on Monday from Major League Cricket, Mark Stolman, former mayor of Morrisville, who'll be talking about the Major League Cricket Championships coming in a few days in Morrisville on July 20th. Ukraine suffered a heavy wave of Russian drone attacks with Kyiv under fire for the third consecutive night. One person was killed and 4 wounded in the capital, and explosions have been reported in other parts of the country. Russian General Ivan Popov was dismissed after accusing the military leadership of failing its troops. The G7 is holding off on Ukraine membership, but it looks like they're all going to be providing weapons and training for armed forces and shared intelligence. Zelensky says it's just a matter of time before Ukraine joins the NATO alliance, and this is all taking place in Vilnius, Lithuania. Meanwhile, speaking of AI, Elon Musk is looking at creating his own AI company called XAI. He says it's going to be an artificial intelligence company that is a maximally curious AI that is pro-humanity and safer than other offerings. Meta is also primed to release a commercial arm of its AI model, according to the Financial Times. So we're seeing AI innovation, generative AI, taking unprecedented pace of innovation and change, which I think we're going to talk about today. What does AI mean for the future, for what we do as journalists, what we do as musicians, artists, who controls the data, who's making these decisions, and what jobs are at threat. America's rate of inflation fell to 3% in June. Could be good news for President Joe Biden. Core inflation, which excludes fuel and costs, slowed to 4.8%. And Britain remains in the doldrums, its economy following a small rise of 0.2% in April. Yesterday, Boris Johnson, the former prime minister, was on with Laura Coates at CNN and basically supported the United States against Ukraine, saying that he supports Biden, even though he was a big supporter of Trump in fighting Ukraine. And finally, the IMF has approved a $3 billion bailout deal of Pakistan. A country will receive about $1.2 billion up front, with the rest paid over 9 months. But struggling to meet debt repayments, inflation has soared, its economy is really, really suffering. And we have been talking a lot about India recently, but we are going to get Pakistan is close to India, right on the border there, a separate nation, a smaller nation, and a much weaker nation economically. So we're going to, bring that up. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started today. I want to thank you all for being with us on this show. I'm going to bring with us Mark Lee and our other guests who will be joining us. And of course, Mark, I didn't talk much about U.S. news. Temperatures rising all over the country and world. And of course, in Durham, a city that has been plagued with a lot of gun violence. Big news, and that North Carolina's senior senator from the Senate, Mike Woodard, is the front runner for the mayoral race in Durham. Happy for the senator because I think he was getting a little burned out in the Senate, and it's quite nice. He's got a free swing for a mayoral seat. I actually think Mike Woodard often missed being in the city of Durham. He loves Durham, and the years went by, and sometimes he would tell me that, God, the grass is always greener, even though I'm a city councilor. He would often say that there were days when he was in the Senate where he wanted to be there. And there were all these great things going on in Durham. And well, now Mike Woodard might have that chance.
He may have the chance to hang out, like I said, I guess so.
Out of nowhere. He almost felt like stuck. Was he going to run for a council of state office? I think I'm happy for him. He's a really smart guy. I think he'll do good. We're going to reach out to him, bring him on the show. But that's exciting for Durham, I think.
Yeah, it's very exciting for Durham. Like I said, he is definitely one that gets around quite a bit in terms of events. I've seen him at a number of things at the Heritage Center, the Hayti Heritage Center. I've also seen him regularly at the because they usually have the politicians there on the state, local, and other levels, as well as they celebrate the 4th of July. So I actually just saw him know that he was there about a week and a half ago, and all in that space. So yeah, a lot of folks are saying that he is the front runner. Another person in the legislature, because a lot of people would see that as a step down. But another person in the legislature had actually considered running and then decided not to run, said that he enjoyed retirement, that being Ken Spalding. And now folks are waiting to see whether Mark Anthony Middleton, the mayor pro tem, or whether Leonardo Williams, who is a business advocate, will, and definitely a entrepreneur himself, will decide to run or not. So that'll be interesting to see whether any people.
I was wondering, is Mark Anthony up this year, or is he?
I think that I'm not sure. I need to double check that, but I do know that he was one of the ones that was speculated to be running. And like I said, Leonardo is a known entrepreneur here in the area with he and his wife, who is originally from Zimbabwe, if I remember correctly. But I know it's one of the African nations. So we'll be interested to see how that goes and everything. It was actually interesting that you mentioned Pakistan, because I was actually at the bus stop not that long ago, and I ran into a young lady that is here for a fellowship, and that is actually where she is from. So she is attending Duke University on a 5-week internship. I was actually telling her about Pod TV, and I mentioned that we had folks from India, and that we sometimes talk about Pakistan, and her exact words were, I hope it was nothing negative because of that whole conflict between Pakistan and India. But she is here for a 5-week fellowship, so I think she's got 2 more weeks to go. And all along those lines, when I ran into her, she was going to a symposium, because like I said, she is here literally from Pakistan and will then be heading back to her home country to practice medicine and all in that space. So we do have folks that are coming from all over the world to practice and to learn medicine from Duke, UNC, and other institutions as well. You also mentioned really quickly about the heat wave, and I was just going to say that the heat wave is definitely taking its toll on folks. I'm going to bring in Sasha Starr in a minute as well, and hopefully Nick will be joining us also. But the heat wave is prompted the so much in the U.S. that they are saying that 112 million people are under alert. So they were definitely saying that the intense heat wave has prompted the National Weather Service to issue that heat alert to more than 112 million people on this particular morning, with no let up in sight for some areas. So they're definitely saying that in various parts of the United States, there have been long-standing records that have toppled, especially in the Southwest, and the duration of this event that's set to continue well into next week increases public health danger. So we hope that folks are taking notable precautions in terms of their water intake, in terms of staying out of the heat and doing the other things as well. So alerts are up from the Atlantic to the Pacific coast and include nearly all of Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Missouri, Nevada, California, and Arizona. So that is definitely something that people are paying a great deal of attention to. And I know you said you were out running, but that was earlier in the morning, and that is probably a better time to go out running.
One of the advantages of running on the greenways is the shade. So I'm from West Virginia, so I alternated. So today was my hill day. So I did about 3.5 miles of hills, 2 rounds. One stretch is 1.7 miles. So I do it, basically 4 times or 3 times. And but the shade is nice. And I think there's a big difference when you're getting out there in the heat. But I like the heat runs in the summer because my muscles feel so loose. And then when in the fall, when I run, my body just won't loosen up. I mean, you're tight the rest of the day. So I don't run from the November, all the way up until spring. So
no, that makes a lot of sense.
I gain weight. Nick, I always gain 10 pounds in the winter. I'm down 14 pounds right now.
Hey, Nick, I've got to teach you about something. I definitely want to learn about the heat, but sometimes in the heat, we are also concerned about our animals. I know that some people, including you, dress their animals up in sweaters and other things along those lines. I just saw a commercial yesterday, and I wanted to know if Tilly has this product or not. It was actually, and that's what the commercial was joking about, because it's named after a food and all in that space. But does your dog have insurance, and why would you give insurance to a dog? Because like I said, I was watching TV yesterday and I saw this whole commercial about Pumpkin, which apparently is animal insurance, and I was wondering whether your dog maintained insurance and why you would give the dog insurance in the first place. We're not hearing you, Nick, so I don't know what you got going on with your particular
I just have to mute myself. But Mark, the answer is no and no. The insurance industry is not in business to not make a profit. So every time you buy an insurance product, you figure out you lost 25% of your premium to administrative cost and to commissions. So the thing is, it's a bad deal. So the only time you buy it, if you absolutely have to buy it, like homeowners insurance, car insurance, etc. So it's a bad deal. And I've been in the industry now for about 40 years. And I even told people yesterday, it's a bad deal. I mean, so that's the reason you shouldn't buy insurance on your bloody dog. But more important is the news that we're discussing. Okay, yes. Notice what happened. Heat in the USA is the big news. It's not the big news. What happens is that the news media sets our agenda. And when they set the agenda, they said that this is the big news. But that's not the big news. Here's the big news. The debt is $31 trillion and continuing to rise. And we're not discussing it at all. Social Security is going bankrupt next decade. We're not discussing it at all. Medicare is going bankrupt this decade. We're not discussing that at all. And the reason why is the media sets the agenda. And when the media sets the agenda, we discuss heat in the United States, which frankly isn't important at all.
But not only do we discuss that, but there are two other issues that have come up in the media that you probably agree.
I predicted it.
There are two other things that are being discussed in the media that probably should be not as discussed as much, and I'd love to hear folks' thoughts about this, but the U.S. Senator is out there calling for a federal investigation into Logan Paul's energy drink Prime. So apparently he doesn't have anything better to do, so he's going to look into a federal investigation into that.
See, there you go. There's another waste of time, okay? That should be delegated to a federal agency, not a U.S. Senator. Here's what the U.S. Senator needs to deal with. This issue. Here, which is the debt, $31 trillion. Here's another issue that the senator needs to deal with: national security, which is what Sasha brings up every week on our show. But the senator, because they're really have tiny minds, runs into a drink that should be delegated to a administrative agency to determine the effectiveness or the not effectiveness or the danger of doubling and tripling the caffeine that's in the stupid drink. This is the misappropriation and the waste, the fraud, and the abuse.
There's another issue that is a federal issue. And I'd love to know, because I think it came out of the whole abortion conversation. So I want to know if you think that this is important as well, because apparently the FDA has approved, and I thought we already had some of these, but apparently we don't. Apparently the FDA has approved the first non-prescription, so you can go to the store and everything, daily oral contraceptive. So apparently this is something that they think is more important as well. And like I said, I think part of this has to do with the response to Dobbs from last year and all in that space. But should the federal government and the rest of the folks be even caring about this? Because apparently this is the first time that this has been approved over the counter. And I thought there was over-the-counter birth control pills that were already out there.
The abortion issue, according to the Supreme Court, is delegated to the states. It's not a federal issue. If it's not a federal issue, then you need to deal with federal issues. Here's a federal issue: national security. Why aren't we dealing with that? Well, looks like we are trying to deal with it. Immigration. Why is it all of a sudden this week immigration's not a problem? Did people stop coming across the border? No, that's not what happened. The media deemed it not to be a problem. Your media, ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS, deemed it not to be a problem, not worthy for discussion this week and this week only, and hence immigration has stopped in the United States. Well, that's garbage. It obviously hasn't stopped. Ukraine, it's a problem every bloody day. Okay, I mean, you're talking about a nuclear power going to war with a non-nuclear power that we're backing. That's a power that should be on the front center every day. Why isn't it? Because your media, the garbage that you listen to, has determined it not to be an issue for your worthiness. So what happens is, whether we like it or not, your brain is set by the agenda of 5 major companies in the United States. Yes, Chateau.
Quick question though. Is it also our fault? Because at what point can we oversaturate the market on new, where we lose attention as people or as viewers? So saying the media is always at fault, is it partially our fault as well? Because, for example, if Ukraine's on the TV all day, every day, at what point do we oversaturate that issue and people begin to tune it out anyway? if, for example, the Logan Paul drink, the big issue that they're talking about is the marketing to kids because it is unsafe to kids, which is similar to the cigarette issue way back when. So, and which is also an issue with guns because they're saying the marketing to kids. So is that, I mean, can that be a federal issue, and can that be plugged in? Because every day there's tons of issues. I mean, there's shootings every day. There's cancer problems every day. There's immigration every day. But again, can we blame the media all the time when it's our viewing, our what we view and how we oversaturate or get lost in particular things?
Yeah, well, the thing is, since the media is responsible for setting the agenda of the nation, yes, they're subject to blame all the time. And the whole point that it's oversaturated. Okay, I mean, if you look at a problem that happens every day, immigration, for example, just because I don't want to listen to it doesn't mean it's not important. Let's go look at the national debt. Just because I don't want to listen to it doesn't.
I'm sorry, Nick, just for a second. I think Toby's saying, if I hear him correctly, we choose where we put our eyeballs. We can choose not to look at whatever media channel or CNN, Fox, or whatever. Eventually, they'll get the message. Am I wrong, Jacoby?
Yeah, well, I think what you're saying is you think you have a choice, Lee. As I explained before, 5 companies control 90% of your media.
Well,
you don't have a choice.
Turn them off.
You think you have a choice.
Yeah, no, Nick, we do. We technically do have a choice. And what Lee's talking about turning them off.
What's your choice other than turn them off?
But the thing is, the media is a business. The media is in for eyeballs. And if you don't watch, then the media doesn't make money. So what is the media going to do? It's going to find the hot topic. And if the hot topic is something that, and the only reason a topic becomes hot is because the viewers find the eyeballs for it. Like Ocean's Gate, for example, that became viewing on everybody's channel because it was interesting. There was a video, there was a guy who had been doing hydraulic presses. He's big time YouTuber. Well, he had done just a year ago a video on imploding. His video skyrocketed because people started looking at implosions, and he does such a great job with his stuff. But his video, again, skyrocketed because that eyeballs, that's where the video went. Nothing on immigration on YouTube because it was there. But it, again, it's where the viewer is going. So the media has to attract those eyeballs. So again, is it not saying the media is not at fault, but are we at fault as well? Because again, you keep saying that these things should be on TV every day. If they're on TV every day, is that following the business model that's there? Because they've got to make money.
Hey, Jacoby, to that point, and I'd love to hear Sasha's standpoint on this and his thoughts around this, but that is a concern, and you kind of alluded to it, Jacoby, that I have heard. It's kind of like and I'm going to date myself, the Vietnam War and other things. If the images are constantly on the TV and the images are constantly there, Sasha, do you ever have any fear as a person that is from Ukraine, definitely has some very strong opinions on what is going on with the Ukraine and Russian war, that it is being so oversaturated that it is turning off the mind of the rest of the world because they are constantly seeing those images. And that's kind of what Jacoby was alluding to, so much so that they are maybe not as concerned as they should be, because definitely Ukraine, as you have stated several times, is at the center of what is going on with the free world and all in that space. But I'm just wondering, are we being so oversaturated that it is running into a problem of maintaining and developing new support? And like I said, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Well, I was following the media, international media, for that matter, covering this just ended NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania. What I must admit is that no network really took time to explain in details actually what's happened in Vilnius. This was probably a key summit in the last probably in all history of NATO, and a lot of um, mm, details, very important details, were not covered at all. I think the reason is that the networks failed to provide interpretation of these events. So when you are talking about, for example, Zelensky, president of Ukraine, he lashed out at NATO's countries, all of them, including United States, who are helping great deal to Ukraine in the last year, almost year and a half. Yet he was bombastic in his critique.
Stupid.
Have you? No, wait a moment. I'm not trying to give my interpretation of that. I'm just telling you what happened. And have you heard it on any major US network? What's happened there? Probably not, because I was trying to find this information. The only thing is, I think CNN very briefly said that something like Zelensky was not entirely happy, but that's not true. That's not true. He was bombastic. He was very aggressive, and I agree, it's not very smart at all. I think Zelensky, in my opinion, he's just getting fatigued, tired, and I think he, at the best possible scenario next year, he will be replaced as the president of Ukraine. I think one man can carry only that much. They failed to give us an understanding what actually said in this summit, what was agreed on that summit, and who is the biggest winner of that summit. No information. Let me tell you who was the biggest winner of that summit. It was Russia. Because essentially what NATO said, that they will accept Ukraine as a member of NATO when Ukraine will win the war against Russia. How many countries in the world can win the war against Russia? Can China win against Russia? Not necessarily. Can India beat Russia? I don't think so. Can Turkey, can England beat Russia? No, not at all, no chance. Maybe United States can beat Russia, very possible. But except United States, which country in the world can beat Russia in a war?
Well, I
Let's
think,
say,
Well,
let's
just
and I think in the world order, we just don't know, is Russia going to be a failed state moving forward? And is the new
it
world
doesn't matter. That can failed state can be any country in the world, with exception possibly of the United States. That failed state is killing hundreds of civilians in Ukraine, and now that Ukraine will not be a member of NATO for a foreseeable future. So now Russia got a carte blanche, an invitation. Please come over and kill
Well-
as many Ukrainians as you can. That's what's the result of the summit.
Well, is it possible that I don't know, one analyst that I've heard talk about what Zelensky did and him being, showing his agitation and being bombastic and everything is the role that he had to play to keep inspiring his people to holding on that he's fighting for them. So he had to play his role in being bombastic. And I don't think it was too much of a bad thing because of the situation, but is it possible that the reason, and I can understand the reasoning the reason that I've heard that, not allowing Ukraine into NATO at this moment during the war means that once you sign the document, then you're already agreeing to having that war with Russia. So, and I think Steve tried to allude to it, and there was actually a show that I was watching last night that was kind of, in a sense, kind of I guess fitting for this moment, or fitting for what you're saying. But how Russia they're waiting to see if Russia bleeds themselves out, because since Russia is, the issue is now that they've got the whole assassination that happened of the Russian general. You've got the Russian general who's being, I think, imprisoned because he spoke out. You're having other individuals really upset. So they're saying they're still providing munitions and hoping that Ukraine will end up winning because Russia bleeds themselves out.
Okay. Listen, it is possible scenario that Russia will bleed itself out. Of course it is. And that would be preferable scenario to almost all. I think 2 billion people in the world checking in the morning their news to see whether Putin is already dead, and waiting for that date. And but I want to tell you something. It's a little bit oversimplified point of view that Russia will bleed itself out. Yes, but it may happen 10 years from now. And in the meantime, they will destroy and kill as many Ukrainians as possible. In fact, what they are doing now, they're not even concerned so much with killing Ukrainians as much as destroying their infrastructure, the cities, schools, theaters, universities. So they want to create Ukraine a rubble that there will be at the end of the day, there will be not enough money in the world to bring Ukraine up from the destruction what Russia is now doing. And now NATO. Now, I'm not criticizing, by the way, I'm not criticizing NATO at all for not admitting Ukraine and not issuing invitation to it. First of all, if there is no consensus to admit Ukraine in NATO, that invitation is absolutely meaningless. It's actually, I even don't understand what's the point. Okay, you're issuing invitation to somebody who you are not prepared to admit. What kind of business is that? What kind of politics is that?
Sasha?
Oh, yes.
Just a quick question. You were talking about how Russia's really destroying the infrastructure of Ukraine. I'm not disagreeing with that. I don't know the rebuilding is going to be so difficult. BlackRock and a lot of companies are lining up for those dollars already. Am I wrong?
I don't have any evidence of that. There is some talk about that. I would agree to that. But when we are talking about trillion, well over $1 trillion, I don't think that BlackRock Capital will provide $1 trillion. I don't think
there's money in those hills.
Have you counted? Did you see this money in the bank? Where? How do you know that?
We rebuilt Europe after World War II, did we not? I think we're going to do the same thing here, and there's going to be a lot of money to a lot of well-connected companies. That's my prediction.
I completely agree with that.
It's a pure speculation. It's a pure speculation. First of all, nobody will touch Ukraine until it's at war. And the war now will become endless simply because the end of the war means that Ukraine can be accepted to NATO. What Putin was one of the main reasons why he started the war is to make sure that Ukraine will not be a member of NATO. So now all Putin needs to continue the war. By the way, all he needs is to shoot one missile a week, maybe once a month. So the war still continues. Maybe it's not as intensive war, but it will be still a war. It still means that Ukraine cannot become a member of NATO. So in my opinion, again, it's my opinion, you can disagree with that as much as you want, but the biggest winner became Russia. Period. Full stop.
Well, as you mentioned,
and I just had a question, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, but whether it is the war in Ukraine, whether it is gang violence here in the United States and gun violence in general, how much have we as a society become desensitized toward violence and everything? Because like I said, we see it all the time on and it's kind of what Nick was alluding to, on our TV screens. We see it all the time regularly. We see the images of the devastation of what is going on in Ukraine and even other parts of the world, but definitely Ukraine, mostly on the news and everything. So how much have we become desensitized? I mean, how often do we hear a gang shooting any place in the world? I mean, I know you're leaving Atlanta, Lee, and I'm sure there were several incidences while you were there, and there'll probably be several incidents when you get back.
Heck, one of the mayors got arrested while I was down there the last couple of days, if you're following the news.
Look, I'm going to run, but we're talking about AI tomorrow, and we got the guest coming on Monday. Elon Musk's AI company. I think we need a dedicated show to AI. That's there. Folks, stay cool where you are. I'll be back tomorrow. And I'll be on WPTF Radio every Friday from 3 to 4. And I just joined State Lines, the new TV show, so we'll be starting again on August 11th for the new season. So I'm looking forward to doing 2 TV shows and statewide radio this year. So
sounds great and everything. Definitely like you're moving up there as a media giant yourself, Steve, and everything. But what is your folks? I guess I'll toss it to Jatovi and maybe even others that want to talk about it as well, because I do sometimes feel that we have become so desensitized to all of the violence that is happening around the world.
So I think, I mean, you're right on that. And I think what Sasha was alluding to tie in the Ukraine situation into it, I think that's what a lot of the Ukrainians are, what's happening to them as they wake up and they hear bombs in the morning and bombs in the afternoon and gun violence and people dying in particular cities in Ukraine. And the same thing with Russia is trying to break the will of people by desensitizing them to the violence, and that breaks their will and then has them not wanting to join NATO or not wanting to have that peace or have their own nation. They just will end up doing whatever Russia has beaten them into. And so, I mean, so yes, desensitization, that's happening, and that's, you know, what's going on in Ukraine. And I did want to say, Lee, I think you're completely correct on businesses lining up, because if a business sees money, they're going to get the money, and they'll stand in line just to rebuild because there's trillions of dollars.
Absolutely disagree with that. Nobody will put any money in a country which is fighting for its survival. Even if you have $10 trillion, when you're going to move money now and start to build places
no, the war's got to be over.
Gosh, I don't think that they're saying that they're going to. I don't think they're saying they're going to build them now. I think they're saying that after the war, there will be a rush.
So what's their waiting until the war will be over? How the war will be over? Each war ends in peace, in negotiations. Today, Ukraine is unwilling to negotiate at all. Period. Full stop. So NATO has to balance very much with the ideas that it has to help Ukraine. At the same time, there is no peace at the end, and so it can go on forever. And that exactly plays in Putin's Russian hands. So now all they need to continue the war, but it will be very intensive war, and it will be just slightly once a week exchange of artillery shells, and that's all. And it means that NATO will not get Ukraine forever. That war will last forever. And because the war will last forever, there is a BlackRock or any other capital available in the war, $10 trillion, $100 trillion. It doesn't matter. No single dollar will go to Ukraine while it's at war, and it will be at war indefinitely. So I don't
think the war will go on forever, because unless we become desensitized to the war and not really, keep the war popping up. Because Nick, when you were talking about having it on every day, all day, every week, that's where I think the desensitization will come into play. But I think it popping up every other week, or just this is what's going on. These children were killed in Ukraine because of Russia. I think that actually that takes longer for us to be desensitized to because of the fact that it's not every day, all day. And then we begin to tune it out because, oh no, it's another day with Ukraine hearing about Ukraine.
You're talking about perception of US viewership of the war. But that's not the most important thing. It's important, but not the most important thing. The most important thing is what's happened on the battle line. What's
Sasha?
happened every day. That's what's important.
Well, you
Sasha?
also have to add into the calculus, which this panel has not brought in, and the media hasn't brought in. And here's the calculus. The support of China and India for Russia should not be underestimated. And the American public, like we have taken a position, we will not buy goods from China, period. We go into a store, we see something marked made in China, we do not buy it. Buy anything else but anything made in China. China is tacitly supporting Russia, propping them up. And because they're being propped up, there is no change in Russia. The other country that's doing it is India. India plays both sides really well. They play the Russian side. They need and want their oil. They play the American side. We're friends with America also as well. No matter how you look at it.
I hear what you're saying, Nick, but I got a question for you. Hold on a second. I got a question for you, Nick. Nick, hold on a second. I got a question for you, Nick. Do you have a computer that is on right now and everything? Do you have a watch on your hand? Do you have several other products? I don't know, because it is so ingrained that you could literally boycott China and India, because it is almost impossible, I would think, Jacoby.
Almost,
but am I wrong? Is it pretty much ingrained in everything that we have?
Mark, you have to be intentional. You have to go look and find where these goods are made, and then look for alternative goods. The clothing is today made in Vietnam, made in Bangladesh, made anywhere else, ABC, anywhere but China. China is not your friend, my friend. China is not your friend.
Easy to say.
Russia friend, not.
It is very easy to say that, but it is impossible to do that.
It's difficult to do that.
No, it's impossible.
You can look. You can go to a store. We go into stores all the time.
Nick,
we look at it. Look at clothes made in China,
computer.
made in Vietnam, by Vietnam. Now,
where did
the
going to be come from?
No, you're never going to be perfect on that strategy.
There we go.
But if you do not start sending a message to China, we are not going to buy your goods. It's similar to your friend Mulvaney, or whatever transgender person was. Let's get real. Joe Poolhall does not want to be associated with Jane transgender.
That is
He made a big move to Bud and say, look, we're not going to buy your products. And they put a hurting on it. The United States American public has the right and the ability to boycott Chinese goods. And they should. They should. Anywhere you can find anywhere else but China. ABC.
But Nick, our government is letting Chinese goods in, unlimited.
Again, we're talking.
You as an individual have a right, Lee.
If we're going to talk realistic
strategy, anybody but China.
If we're going to talk realistic and not idealistic, we have to realize that Chinese goods are here to stay. It's not happening where, okay, we're going to boycott China. Well, you know what? Turn off your TV, turn off your lamps, turn off the homes that you live in, turn off the pipes that the actual generators that are outside, turn off the cups because they're plastics that are made in China, turn off all these things, because now you're back into the Stone Age, because everything, hate to say it, right now, everything that you're using, everything that you're driving in right now, Lee, is coming from, it has ties to China. So when you're saying idealistically, it's great, we're going to boycott China, it is not the boycott of, hey, we're going to talk about this Bud Light thing and this transgender individual. You know what? You know who's still selling Bud Light in their actual bar? The man who took a Bud Light can and shot it. That same man, Kid Rock, has a bar that's still selling Bud Light. You know why? Because it's entrenched within our society. Bud Light is still being sold. So you can say that, okay, we should boycott. Okay, they dropped 22%, but is that due to other options? Is that due to people drinking, trying different things? Yes. So, and then on top of that, yeah, they can be upset, but 22% drop when it's still the number, oh no, it's the number 2 selling beer. So we're not dropping China. We're not dropping Bud Light. You have to speak realistically and not idealistically.
Well, you can tell Disney that.
Something very
Go
important.
tell Disney
Disney,
that. Toby.
Tell
Like
Florida
Disney,
that.
go tell
Florida
Publix.
had a drop in tourism. It's
It
not
hurt.
because of Disney including people. You even pointed out yesterday that it's the prices that is actually creating a drop in actual tourism to Disney.
Prices are a factor.
So you cannot say that, oh no, it's inclusivity that actually caused that and they're being punished for that. Florida itself is being
Price is
exclusive.
a factor. Price is a
Price
factor.
is a factor. And it's not, it's more so the actual political, the policies that's happening in Florida. Because if you look at tourism in California, there is a Disney World where actually tourism is increasing. So it's not, we cannot take these silos and say this silo here is why.
I'll try to
Yeah,
look.
hold on a second. Speaking of silos,
Wait, and Mark, can I follow up with Shasa? Shasa made a comment about Ukraine not wanting to come to the peace table. Is it? Did I hear that correctly?
Sorry, I didn't understand you.
When you were talking, you mentioned about Ukraine and Russia, that there's not going to be peace until one wins because Ukraine will not come to the peace table, have peace talk. Did I hear that correctly?
Correct, yes.
Why are you so confident about that? Because if Israel and Palestinians, Arafat and Rabin came to the peace table, the Oslo Accords, why do you think Russia and Ukraine cannot?
There's a great crimes were committed by Russians in Ukraine.
And there were great crimes also against Israel, war crimes.
No,
With these,
no, you cannot compare what's happened to
suicide
Israel
bombers?
with, what you're talking
They were-
about, a handful of people being killed here and there. Yes, it's a tragedy for Israelis, but it does not compare to what Russia is doing and continue to do in Ukraine. There is an incredible difference that I'm not even willing to discuss. That's why the peace between Ukraine and Russia is impossible for foreseeable future. So there's only one way for Ukraine and this war is to defeat Russia indeed. But you see what NATO is doing and US including. What they're saying is, for example, they need the parity, at least parity in the air. So they need F-16s. United States produced tens of thousands of F-16s, and actually it's not producing them anymore because they're producing much newer aircraft, F-35 and others. However, the decision so far is not to give Ukraine F-16s, so they cannot have advantage in the area, not even a parity. So now, according to NATO doctrine, you're going to the offensive when you have superiority in the air, and not, or U.S. actions, for example, in 1991 in Iraq. We saw it on television how it was done. So there was complete domination and superiority in the air. Then the tanks are coming in and so on. Ukraine was giving tanks just very recently, about a few months ago. The flights, the F-16s, or missiles, ATACMS, who can hit from HIMARS, they can hit the territory 300 kilometers and probably more. It's not given to Ukraine. So what they're saying is, guys, here's a swimming pool. You want to learn how to jump, right? So you first learn how to jump, and once you will learn, we will give you the water. We will fill the swimming pool with the water. So people are killing each other and they're breaking their arms and legs and so on, because if not, they will never get the water. So what NATO and the United States are saying to Ukrainians, well, so you first win the war, and then they will accept you in NATO. But how you can win the war without superiority in the air? It's impossible. Russia, again, because NATO and United States were so slow to supply the weapons, Russians have plenty of time to improve their position, to mine all the fields, 200 100,000 square kilometers of mines there. So now to go for all-out attack and to evict the Russians, it will require Ukrainians to lose tens of thousands of their brave soldiers. And I think, in my opinion, Ukraine is better off to just stand still, not attack, just to defend their present position and wait for F-16s to
Sasha?
come Smith, so on. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard in the news that Russia's putting out landmines now. Aren't those war crimes? Where's the UN? Why are they silent?
Write letter to UN. Why are you asking me?
No, normally, the UN, when it comes to war crimes, like they're out there, whether it's Israel or other countries. Why I don't hear a peep from them about these landmines.
I'm not big fan of UN. It's an absolutely impotent organization which is capable.
He said several times that
I tend to agree with you.
But Sasha, just really quickly, and I want to get to one other issue, and I was actually going to bring it up to Lee's attention and everything. But before I get to that very quickly, Sasha, do you ever fear that this war will be a never-ending war? Because I mean, I think about Ireland and UK, which have been at war for decades, and I even think about, to a lesser extent, but it is an extent, Eritrea and Ethiopia, and that war has been going on for a while as well. So do you ever get or have the fear as a Ukrainian that this could be a never-ending war, or a war that goes on endlessly and all in that space?
Okay, as it is now, nobody can take over. Ukraine cannot go through Russian defenses, and Russia cannot get any progress on the battlefield in Ukraine. Okay, so now everything depends whether NATO and United States want to end the war in the near future, in distant future, never. That's all really depends. Ukraine can defend itself. Russia will not be able to progress even 1 inch. That's clear. Ukraine now, as it is at least, cannot make any progress either, although they are trying very hard. They're doing certain achievements, but this is nothing to talk about the decisive breakthrough. It's not there. So if United States and NATO would want to finish in war, and there is no peace agreement, that's one way how to finish the war is a peace agreement. It's just not there. Even if NATO will stop supply all weapons to Ukraine, Ukraine will continue to fight the same thing, and they will not agree to a peace with Russia. So that's not an option. Now, if Ukraine will be supplied ATACMS missile, a long-range missile, and F-16s in normal quantity, I'm talking about, say, 100 plus fighters, then Ukraine can actually achieve the victory. What means achieve the victory is annihilate all Russian troops on its territory. I'm not talking about taking Crimea, taking Donbass, or taking this or that. I'm not interested in taking something. I'm interested in destroying the enemy's army. This way, Ukraine will have all the power, the military power, to destroy the enemy's army. Other than that, the war will be going on forever. We are talking about 10 years plus.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. And everything, real quickly, Jacoby, you're on mute, but I was going to switch topic really quickly and everything. As I said, I was going to bring up something to Lee.
I was just going to say, before you switch, Lee, the UN has put out a report about war crimes in Ukraine. The problem
How recently?
This was October 22nd. Then they put out another one in March 23rd or March.
Because I just heard about the landmines yesterday.
Well, I think the UN is actually trying to track the war crimes, but the thing is, we're not going to hear from the UN because our views of the UN aren't going to have us watch the UN. It
is what it is.
Yeah, the media is not going to cover what we don't want to watch, and we don't want to. We don't really care
Speaking of
about
things that we don't want to watch and everything, I had a question, and something I was watching, and that was actually surprised that one of them was a African American woman that switched her party affiliation. That took place on yesterday in the state legislature. Maybe it was on Tuesday or Monday, but it was recently that she switched and everything. But I was just wondering, are we going to see more of this party switching? And do you have a obligation to your constituents, or do you have more of that value-oriented conversation? Because one of the things that she was dealing with school vouchers, she's a supporter of school vouchers, and she felt that the Democratic Party was not doing what she wanted, so she switched to the Republican Party. So I was just wondering, Lee, how much are you obligated to your constituents? And I had a quick question about another constituency and DeSantis and everything. I know we're going.
Yeah, Mark, I think it's a great question because the party does help you. The party does help you get elected. The party sets policy, but you have to remember, they're representatives of the people who elected them. I think that's where their first allegiance should be to represent the people in their district. And if there are people in their district who benefit from school vouchers, then I think they need to ignore what the party wants to say. You guys are misguided. That's not.
I think he hit a zone and everything, so they might have hit a zone. Any thoughts on that, Jatovi? And all along those lines, that was in the woman that switched her allegiances over the vouchers.
I mean, I mean, yes, you're bound to your constituents, but also, I do think that you should choose what is right by your constituents. Sometimes your constituents don't know what's right because we tend to.
I'm sorry, Jatovi. Constituents don't know what's right for them?
No. What I'm saying is sometimes the constituents don't know what's right because they fall into the problem of politics. And they fall into...
I thought we said the decisions like between a woman and her doctor should make decisions. So why not the individual and his, whatever he's getting his information from, make his own decisions?
Again,
what's best?
I'm talking about what's choosing what is right for their constituents, because sometimes their constituents fall for politics, which have policies that do not.
No, I heard that, but let's be consistent.
So if we're going to be consistent, take, for example, in the 50s and 60s, the civil rights movement would not have happened because the politics and policies that the constituents were advocating for would not allow for Black people to have rights. In the 70s, when women's rights was a big issue, the constituents of particular areas were against their leaders, and their leaders gave voting rights to women. So again, that's what I'm talking about.
Jatovi, I'm going to grant you that you're correct in those. I will agree with you in those cases, but those are limited, and those people obviously were wrong. But in general, we say the smaller the government, the more it's attached to the people, and less from Washington, the better it is in the interest of the people. Which is why they say, a person and their doctor, or people want their own decisions for their own lifestyles.
And again, personal and the doctor, like I am in agreement. And this is where, again, there has to be balance, and there has to be where the constituents, yes, you as representing those constituents, yes, you lean towards those constituents, but you also lean to what is right and what sometimes those constituents.
No, I agree with you, but the cases you gave, I agree with you, but in those cases, they were breaking the law. Those constituents, they were breaking the law and depriving, whether it's Blacks or women, of their rights.
At the time, it wasn't breaking the law. That law.
I'm not so sure. Jim Crow was not breaking the law?
Not in the South. Poll taxes were actually very much legal in the South.
Yeah, that stuff was legal, and so they had to write the laws to make them illegal.
Yeah.
The constituents did not want them, and they wanted to keep the legality of treating Black people as second-class citizens or minorities as second-class citizens. That's what the constituents wanted. When Ruby Bridges breaking these color barriers and stuff, the constituents did not want integration. They wanted.
I hear you about constituents, and obviously there were some, but also it was some of the politicians in those areas who were putting those policies in place.
again, and those policies again. This is where we have to really look at what's right for society as a whole, and not society in this political arena or
And
this.
speaking of which, and I was going to get
right
to one
or
last thing, and this was for Lee again and everything, and Sasha may have some thoughts as well, since I know he's not the biggest Trump fan, but apparently DeSantis is specifically targeting the evangelical community. He is definitely going after certain groups. He is actually going to be on Friday addressing the Family Leader, an influential Christian organization that draws a large crowd of conservative pastors. So I was wondering, do you think that this is a good strategy by DeSantis? And by the way, Bob Vander Plant, CEO of the Family Leader, said, I really think America wants to turn the page. You're looking for an alternative to Trump. I think Governor DeSantis is the front runner right now. So it sounds like he is playing toward the evangelical crowd. And I was wondering your thoughts about this.
I think it's a large crowd, and I think he should. And I also think he should go more harder on Trump on policy if he feels he's the right guy. I don't see him going hard enough on Trump, and there is a lot on Trump to go on, even for someone who voted for him.
I
The
think
struggle-
he has struggling with the fact that he's too short. He's a very short man, and people don't like short men. Number two,
There have been a lot of short presidents.
yeah, we had, yes, but the DeSantis is not going to be one of those. Now, another problem DeSantis has that he, in a personal interaction, he turns people off. He is not a very pleasant man to interact with, to talk with, or so on. So as many as live performances as he have, as many people he's turning off. That's not a presidential trait. So I don't think that he will go.
Sasha, I've got to challenge you on something, because I was actually just looking at an article recently. It's a group of Twitter moms, and they actually used to be very much in the Democratic camp, and they are finding there are stances that DeSantis has around school issues, speaking of school vouchers and things around that is making them that they are finding him appealing there and finding him very presidential. And these are spread out. I want to say one of the women was in Florida, one was in Texas, one was in California, and they are aligning because they are feeling that DeSantis is the better bet to beat Trump, and they like a lot of his policies, and they find him presidential. And some people were even joking about him being a quote unquote daddy figure and everything.
Is education a state issue or a federal issue?
Education is a federal issue on a lot of levels.
It's
Okay.
both. It's a state and a federal.
I agree. So therefore, imagine that today DeSantis is already president of the United States. So what he can do with the federal laws to continue his agenda, if it is his agenda, I'm not so sure. He's a populist, and he is trying to find topics which will increase his chances to be elected. That's all there is to be. Like any politician, all he needs is to be elected. Well, he will lie. He will say anything what you want him to say just to get elected. So I'm not so sure that he is really sincere.
Sasha, in fairness to DeSantis, and it's just a question I'm throwing out there. Did he lie to get elected as governor? And if so, can you point to any?
I haven't checked that. Have no idea.
Okay.
Well, just to touch on DeSantis is sitting 40 points behind Trump now.
Yeah, he's way back.
And it's not even close race. The reason he's not going after Trump is because of the MAGA crowd. DeSantis needs to keep the MAGA crowd in his corner. And anytime you attack Trump, that's the MAGA crowd. That's that 56% that is right behind Trump. And if you can't court that MAGA crowd, then you're not going to be elected in any primary in that GOP. That's why everybody's trying to out-Trump Trump without attacking Trump. And
so unless Trump drops dead, they don't have a shot.
That's the sad reality that we're in the Republican primary right now.
Well, what about going after the disgruntled Democrats? Because that's what he seemed to be doing with those women that I ran across in that whole Twitter crowd. So what is that going to do? Is he going?
The problem that DeSantis has with the Democrat Party even though I think the party you're talking about, is that the Moms of Liberty or Moms of whatever?
Something like that.
So that was basically one of those they were more conservative in the first place on a lot of their issues. But the problem that DeSantis has in the Democrat Party is because the policies, the more things people hear about his policies and his actual attitude towards those individuals, anybody who tries to question them, that has begun to turn independents off and turn those disgruntled Democrats off. Because, for example, one of the things that he just signed, because he's so anti-immigration and so anti-immigrant, he signed a law where it's making it illegal for licenses from Vermont and a few other states to be recognized.
Toby, I think you misspoke. Am I wrong? When you say anti-immigrant, is he anti-immigrant or anti-illegal immigrant? There's a big difference. Even legal.
The way his policies have been written, and this is why those in Florida, have boycotted against him, is because of how his policies are written. So there was a policy in New York, the stop and frisk law. The stop and frisk law, the way that it was written, it was anti-minority. Hence the reason.
How so?
Because of the way that policing is, it gave the open arms to police to stop anybody they wanted to and grab anybody they wanted to.
Even non-minorities.
But
so how's that racist?
They started profiling.
Let me finish.
No, I understand that.
So the way it became racial profiling is because of the policing tactics. Those policing tactics attacked minorities in an overwhelming percentage.
Toby, even if that's true, the overwhelming percentage of police in New York City are minorities.
Hold on, let me finish. So it doesn't matter, the strategy itself, because that policy itself attacked minorities by a larger percentage, but even in that larger percentage, found in that smaller percentage, when it did stop and frisk those white individuals, there were more contraband found in the Caucasian individuals than it was in those stop and frisk, and it gave open arms to basically shake down an individual. And they shook down so many minorities when they did the stop and frisk. So it essentially made that law and that policy itself bigoted in its tactics, in its ways. So they had to kill it because, again, it was a problem. So when in Florida, DeSantis, the way that he's written his policies, it's given open arms to attacking those with foreign accents. So if you have a foreign accent, I can stop you on the street and say, show me your papers. And so it's not written in a way that's going to be fair to everybody. So if we're talking about fair treatment under the law equally, then if a law is actually hammering one community more so than another, then we need to look at the law and find out.
You're telling me walking while black or Hispanic or Chinese or whatever can be pulled over and stopped because they're speaking with a foreign accent? Show me your papers? And that's the only...
Yes, that is what's happening. And that's why those policies themselves were being boycotted in Florida. That's why Florida itself, there is actually back in history, there was the Green Book. The Green Book was basically a roadmap for minorities to make a safe travel throughout the country so they could find different places that they would not be abused in the South.
There was very good movie, by the way.
Yeah,
that's
a historical fact. And that's what people have written about Florida now, is that Florida is hostile to the LGBTQIA community based on what DeSantis has done.
Do we see any of them moving out of Florida? That those communities moving away?
And the thing is, there are some that have the ability to move away. But the problem is you don't, to say, well, these communities can just up and move, if my roots are in Florida, for
No,
20
I get that. It's not so easy. Just the same thing in Nazi Germany. It wasn't so easy for the Jews to pick up and move. I get that.
No, and by the way, it's time for us to wrap up
as
and
a
everything.
barometer,
So
it's tough because we cannot just say, well, these people aren't moving, so therefore it's not really that bad.
I know that's oversimplifying. It's not fair to them. I get
yeah,
that.
we'll definitely bring up
It's a
more
fair
of this
point.
on tomorrow's issue and everything. I was actually trying to remember, and maybe Jatovi or Lee can remind me of what the term is, but there is a psychological term, to your point, Lee, as we get ready to wrap up, for those that are involved in a fight or in a system and it is going against their own. And I think it came from the World War II and everything, but it's a psychological term. So like when black cops go against and go and do the rules against themselves, but there's a psychological term. I just can't think of the term.
It's not, no. It's
And
not
you tell me where the victim sympathizes with the tormentor?
Something like that. It's, I
Oh,
think it's the
Yeah,
Stockholm-
yeah. There's a term. I
it's
can't
maybe
think of
the
it either.
Stockholm syndrome or something like
Stockholm
that.
syndrome.
Stockholm.
Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I was trying to remember and everything. But on that note, we're getting ready to get on out of here, and we'll have more conversation around this tomorrow, including Sasha's program around Russia and Ukraine. And I'm hoping that Ivo will bring us back some more powerful videos from that area and all along those lines. So that'll be after tomorrow's World Edition, and definitely continue some other conversations. As a matter of fact, we'll have Barbara Show and Modern Investment coming immediately after this. So Barbara Show is actually going to be a rerun from May, and then Modern Investment, I think, is a live program with Peter Bennett talking about some not Modern Investment, I'm sorry, Wall Street Hacker. Don't want to get you confused with your show and all that, but Wall Street Hacker will be coming with Peter Bennett later on this afternoon and all in that space. So we're going to get on out of here, and I apologize for that, Sasha, because I know the intro show is a totally
Mark, do
different.
me a favor. Just stay on the after show just for a second. I just want to share something with you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.